hard to identify the single most important issue, but certainly one of the most important aspects of building the world back better in the 21st century is bridging the divides in society. With so much going on, we can unite people around. It's hard to identify the single most important issue, but certainly one of the most important aspects of building the world back better in the 21st century is bridging the divides in society. So much going on, we can unite people around. It's hard to identify the single most important issue, but certainly
we must work together to counter this outbreak. COVID-19 showed how it affected public health. From criminals spreading false cures for monetary gain to conspiracy, we must urge countries to burn down vice data. This COVID-19 showed how it affects information outbreak. From criminals spreading false cures for monetary gain to conspiracy, we must urge countries to burn down vice data. This COVID-19 showed how it affects information outbreak. From criminals spreading false cures for monetary gain to conspiracy, we must urge countries to burn down vice data. This COVID-19 showed how it affects information outbreak. From criminals spreading false cures for monetary gain to conspiracy, we must urge countries to burn down vice data. This COVID-19 showed how it affects information outbreak.
I think the main effect of the pandemic will be the stimulus and the encouragement that it will give to technological advancement and technological development. 1, 2, 3 decades from now, I think we'll look back to the pandemic and see it as the beginning of what I call the Great Acceleration.
Building a world back better in the 21st century will require us to find new pathways to come together, to generate ideas, and to find common ground.
Well, welcome to GLOBSEC's Bratislava Forum 2021. I'm Maitreyi Sitharaman. I'm the founder of Facultas Media. I've had the pleasure for almost 2 decades now of hanging out with people like you, learning about international relations and international economics across the world. And it's never been a more exciting time than this.
I'll say, very exciting. My name is Terry Martin. I'm a TV news journalist, TV news anchor based in Berlin. I too have been covering international affairs for a while. I'm what they call a veteran journalist, okay? I've been around for 30 years. You can tell by my gray hair that I didn't just start doing this. But anyway, it's a great pleasure for me to be with you today and together with Maitreyi here on the stage.
Well, it's also a pleasure to have you all here in the room. This has been such a dramatic couple of months for all of us, and to see so many of you join us in person in Bratislava, it's been fantastic. Of course, all of those folks joining us virtually as well, right, Terry, who are on our online platform, on our mobile app. So thank you very much for everyone who's participating.
I would just interject here to note that 3 days ago, they had already registered more than 1,000 people for this forum from outside of here. Of course, we've got a lot of people here this year too, more than last year, but the numbers have been going up and up in the past couple of days. We're very, very pleased that so many people could join us from so many countries around the world.
Well, despite restrictions, lockdowns, all of the things that we all have to do when we go back home, right? Quarantines especially. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for those who are joining us virtually. Of course, like I mentioned, they're joining us on our 3D virtual studio, on the mobile app, and it really does help us mix this up in terms of this hybrid session of in-person and virtual. Last year when we were here, there were not as many of us in this room. So to see all of you here, it makes me smile. So welcome.
Thank you. I just want to point out that we are going to be dealing with some technical issues. There's a lot of technology behind this. As you can see, the number of cameras in this room, but just making this happen online and making the virtual app happen as it should. There's a lot of technology and preparation that goes into making this happen. And we have a fantastic team behind us, but sometimes things go wrong, as we all know. Occasionally we'll lose the video signal or the audio signal, or there might be some issues with the app. But I can assure you that those problems will be corrected very quickly. Do stay with us if there is a dropout. And if things get really bad, Maitri and I have prepared a song and dance routine, right?
Oh, yes, we will put on an act, and it will be entertaining because neither of us can sing and neither of us can dance. But the people who do their jobs really, really well are our translation team. So they will be here. Not everyone, of course, will be on the stage or in the Habsburg room speaking in English. So in case that happens and you don't follow the language that is being spoken, please do pick up your headsets. They're there on every chair. Our translation team's going to do a fantastic job. Give it up for them at some point during the day when you're really, really pleased that you got that nugget of information in a language you don't know how to speak. So the translations are on the little boxes that you can see across the board.
That's right. They should be on your seats when you arrive. For those of you in the room here, you'll find English on audio channel 2, and there will be Polish when the Polish president speaks in just a few moments. You'll be needing that at home. Just by the way, if you're at home or in your office watching this remotely, then the language will remain English throughout, just so you're aware of that.
And one thing we all know is that for those of us who've been coming to GLOBSEC for so many years, is that the concept of GLOBSEC was built on security, but the whole definition of security has changed so very much in the last couple of years, especially the pandemic bringing home that it is more than just about national security. This is about economic, social security as well. So we've expanded the topics as expected, as is pertinent to this environment. We have a whole range of issues that we are going to be covering through all of the multiple sessions that will be happening, both here in the Maria Theresa room, but also in the Habsburg room as well, covering the whole gamut of global affairs, right, Terry?
Indeed, and especially coming off of the summits that we have happening right now, with Joe Biden's first visit as president to Europe. We know that there are a lot of issues on the table right now. Talking about security, including climate security, that's suddenly going up the agenda, both within the European Union and with NATO and the G7, of course. At this point, before we get into what we're really going to be doing today, I just want to remind you that you have opportunities to engage with this forum yourself. We're very interested in having this be an interactive forum that all the participants here in the room, but also all of those joining us virtually, will join us as you can. There are different ways you can participate. Here in the room, first of all, if you want to ask a question, you would raise your hand, and when we have question and answer sessions, and some people will have big boom microphones, so you don't have to go to a microphone, they will bring them to you, right? So that's one option. If you're at home, you can also use the messaging app, basically, or you can pose a question using the online app or using the mobile app, and you can use that mobile app also here to ask a question or participate in a number of polls that we're going to be doing today.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite simple. The rules are the same as pretty much every year. When you ask your question, make sure you give your name, your organization, and keep your question quite short. If it's a comment, please keep it very, very brief, because it is going to be very packed in terms of sessions. In terms of what Terry's been talking about of contributing online, if you look at your GLOBSEC app, you can go into the GLOBSEC app and look at your daily session. Within the sessions, you will have the rooms. You can click into that. You will be asked whether you want to ask a question or participate in a poll. As the moderators of these sessions tell you which option is available to you, please do that. This is part of Slido. Hopefully everyone's a little bit aware of Slido. If you're not, go experiment. And this is a good time to do that experiment with figuring out how to ask your questions or participate in polls. So if I can ask this of you, try hopping onto your GLOBSEC app right now and going into the Maria Theresa room. And there's a question up there, which is, what do you think is the most pressing issue to discuss over the next 3 days? Now, I know we're all tempted to write a whole sentence, maybe a paragraph. Just 2 or 3 words are going to be more than enough. We're going to try and create what is called a word cloud, just to show you how this works.
Just going to interject here, because I'm just hearing in my ear that some people have already responded to this,
the online crowd,
to this question. So you guys are very quick, and of course people at home too. They're sitting in front of their computers or with their app. So let's see what responses we're getting already. I'm told that we can pull this up already.
Gives you an idea. Question is, what do you think is the most pressing issue to discuss over the next 3 days? And if We can get that screen up for you. Let's tell you what they've been saying.
Well, let's assume it is coming. But first of all, there we go. Look at that. So this is what you call a word cloud.
So these are the kind of these are the words that our online participants have put in. So security, huge, not surprising, considering it is GLOBSEC. Vaccines, climate, resilience, democracy, global security. Around it, those are the biggest hits. Those are the most contributed words. The others have been put in, maybe not as high in terms of number, but that's how pretty much it works. Terry, are you surprised by that? Are these the things that are on top of your mind?
Not at all. I mean, the SEC part of GLOBSEC is obviously for security, so this is known as a security conference to some degree, although, as Maitri pointed out, the concept has expanded very much, and security is not what we used to think of it as. There are many different dimensions to it now, including cyber and whatnot. So, but I also noticed that democracy was highlighted there consistently as well. Let's face it, the pandemic has been devastatingly disruptive to public health, to livelihoods, to supply chains, to freedom of movement, freedom of assembly, freedoms that we hold dear that we haven't been able to enjoy for a long time, not to mention not being able to go out for dinner or go to the theater and things we've enjoyed so much. But the scourge has exposed some systemic weaknesses in our societies, but it's also enabled in this problem the possibility of transformation to something better. The task is to ask ourselves, what is that better, and what opportunities are there in this pandemic, in this situation, to rebuild the world better?
Well, rebuild the world better, transformation, resilience, trust, all of these are things we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about it while staying safe. Now, how many of you have some sort of protection in terms of vaccines in this room? Raise your hands if you've been vaccinated at least once. That is such a fabulous sight to see. Now, within that, we still have to be careful. There are variants going around. So I'm going to strongly suggest that you always wear a face mask as far as possible. Take it off just like an airplane when you're eating, drinking, or are in a very close environment with somebody you trust. Keep disinfecting your hands. You've seen those stations across the board. The premises are going to be regularly disinfected. So when the announcements come to leave a room, please try and do it quite quickly, because the turnaround time for these folks is very short, to make sure you're safe while you're in this room. Temperature screenings will take place. There will be crowd control measures, so don't be offended if one of the team members comes and says, hey, this group's a bit big, you need to break it up a little bit. Catering, most important for all of us in conferences, is going to be a little bit limited. It's going to be only during coffee breaks and lunch breaks, and only while you're seated downstairs on the ground floor. So keep that in mind, and please do meet each other in person. It is exciting, quite exciting. Partners, very quickly. We're going to just quickly mention some people. None of this will be possible, of course, without partners. Everything you see in this room, everything we're doing, has to be created and funded in some way, of course. So we want to mention some very important partners. Institutional partners for this, very important. The Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs of the Slovak Republic, the Ministry of Defense of the Slovak Republic, and the International Visegrad Fund. There's so many partners we'd like to thank, and we will. But first of all, Terry, you've got a very important job.
I do indeed. We have some introductions to make. As you may have gathered from all the security surrounding this building, we have some very, very special guests here with us today. We've not just one, but three sitting presidents with us today. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the presidents of Slovakia, Poland, and Croatia. So I would invite all of you to come in. A warm round of applause for our three presidents. It's really wonderful to see all of you here together. This is just my second GLOBSEC summit, but there are a lot of familiar faces here, and this year I'm extremely happy to see so many distinguished guests. We're really delighted that you have found time in your extremely busy schedules to join us for the opening of this GLOBSEC Bratislava Forum 2021. It is indeed a great honor to have you with us today. We are going to hear from all three of you. We're going to hear from all three presidents here, so this is a really special privilege. But I'd like to begin by welcoming to the stage Zuzana Czapatowa, the President of the Slovak Republic. The stage is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear Mr. President Duda, President Milanovic, dear Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, this conference calls for rebuilding our world better. It is the right call, but to talk about recovery is not enough. We need to talk about deep structural changes. This goes far beyond the current health crisis. We are beginning strategic discussions about our future as the EU and NATO. We have just launched a conference on the future of Europe. At the NATO summit yesterday, we set at the tone for the alliance's adaptation for the next decade. As we speak, the EU-US summit is discussing the future of our transatlantic partnership. The pandemic has made this conversation even more relevant. It has shown our strengths and exposed our weaknesses, but it has also offered lessons to learn from. Let me mention three of them before I talk about how we can build back better. The first lesson is simple. To successfully handle any crisis, we first need to acknowledge its existence and have a shared perception of what is happening. It was this globally shared perception of the pandemic threat and the globally shared goal of stopping it that mobilized unprecedented scientific and financial resources to protect our citizens and our economies. The second lesson is the importance of rules and respect for them. Countries successful in handling the pandemic were those that applied clear, understandable rules which were then enforced. Respecting the rules can literally save lives. Finally, the pandemic highlighted the importance of prevention, of thinking ahead to prevent the next crisis, of taking action today, such as getting vaccinated or improving our crisis management. Preventive steps taken today will make us resilient to tomorrow's risks. As we enter strategic debates about the EU's or NATO's future, let's keep these lessons in mind and ask these very same questions. Do we have a shared perception and a shared goal that we can translate into concrete actions? Is our rulebook still valid and respected? And do we have the right prevention for the next crisis? Let me start with shared reality and common goals. At yesterday's NATO summit, we agreed that international instability and power competition, misuse of emerging technologies, or the climate crisis can undermine our security. This perception mustn't stay on paper. We must turn it into concrete actions to adapt our institutions and even our lifestyles to the challenges ahead of us. The same goes for the EU as it addresses the questions of its future. What or who do we choose to be? What is our place in the world? Do we have a shared perception of what threats we are facing internally and externally? Today, some debate whether we are too conservative or too liberal, too federal or not enough European. I trust that the conference on the future of Europe, citizens and expert debates will help forge such shared perception. The second lesson is that once we reach this shared view, we need rules to guide us. These must be valid and respected. For Slovakia, the EU and NATO, our democratic rules are our main rulebook at home and abroad. As the EU, we already have the shared perception and the shared goal, our values: democracy, freedom and the rule of law, equality, or the minority rights. We also have rules to ensure that undermining these values has consequences, political or financial. Today, some argue these rules should apply differently. We should certainly discuss whether our rulebook still reflects who we are today. But my plea is simple. Until we agree on new rules, we should respect the current ones. Violations of international rules can endanger everyone, not only those directly affected, be in Georgia, Ukraine, Syria, or Myanmar. The latest example is the case of Mr. Pratasevich in Belarus, involving a forced landing of a plane full of EU citizens under a false pretext. Expressing grave concern should be our first, but not the final step. To protect the rules-based order, we must use our political, diplomatic, and economic tools more efficiently. For the EU, this also implies adjusting our own foreign policy rules. The unanimity principle in practice often means not having a common EU position even on clear human rights violations. If we have a broad consensus and qualified majority, we should be allowed to act. We must also ensure that our rules don't benefit those who violated them. Our business ties should not fill the coffers of repressive regimes. Holes in our tax system should not create safe haven for illegal riches. Let me briefly talk about prevention. We cannot wait until the current trend turns into tomorrow's threats. We must act now. We can only agree on a shared perception of reality and on rules if we have truthful information and facts. To prevent another infodemic, we need effective governance for the online world, one that strengthens transparency and accountability. We need to improve our education and help our citizens adapt to the information age. Just as we developed vaccine for COVID-19, democratic states must find ways to deliver biggest doses of civic education and resilience to their societies. Ladies and gentlemen, if we are to rebuild the world better, we need a shared goal, shared rules, and actions to prevent future crises. To conclude, let me mention one more part essential for any successful construction: the builders themselves. That is all of us. Here, political leaders bear a special responsibility because they are the ones to recognize our shared goals, who set the rules, and who should find solutions to prevent future troubles. We need more of such political leadership, responsible, consensus building, and future oriented. Thank you.
Madam President, I couldn't have expected anything less. Shared goals indeed, and that's something I think all of us in this room are going to look to work towards. We have two more presidents to hear from, but before that, we're going to hear from a man who's probably closer to God than most of us. He has a special message from His Holiness Pope Francis for us.
Signor Presidente, grazie per il suo cortese invito a partecipare tramite questo videomessaggio alla 16ª edizione del GLOBSEC Bratislava Forum, dedicata al tema Building the World Back Better. Saluto lei, tutti gli organizzatori e partecipanti a questa conferenza. Vorrei esprimere la mia gratitudine per la piattaforma che il Bratislava Forum offre all'importante dibattito sulla ricostruzione del nostro mondo dopo l'esperienza della pandemia, che ci costringe a confrontarci con una serie di questioni socio-economiche, ecologiche e politiche gravi e tutti tra loro correlate. Al riguardo vorrei proporvi alcuni spunti, prendendo ispirazione dal metodo del trinomio vedere, giudicare, agire. Vedere, un'analisi seria e onesta del passato che include il riconoscimento delle carenze sistematiche, degli errori commessi e della mancanza di responsabilità verso il creatore, il prossimo e il creato mi pare indispensabile per sviluppare un'idea di ripresa che miri non solo a ricostruire quello che c'era, ma a correggere ciò che non funziona già prima dell'avvento del coronavirus e che ha contribuito ad aggravare la crisi. Chi vuole rialzarsi da una caduta deve confrontarsi con le circostanze del proprio crollo e riconoscere gli elementi di responsabilità. Vedo dunque un mondo che si è fatto ingannare da un illusorio senso di sicurezza fondato sulla fame del guadagno. Vedo un modello di vita economica e sociale caratterizzato da tante disuguaglianze ed egoismi, in cui un'esigua minoranza della popolazione mondiale possiede la maggioranza dei beni, spesso non esitando a sfruttare a persone e risorse. Vedo uno stile di vita che non si prende abbastanza cura dell'ambiente. Ci si è abituati a consumare e a distruggere senza ritegno ciò che appartiene a tutti e va custodito con rispetto, creando un debito ecologico a carico anzitutto dei poveri e delle generazioni future. Giudicare. Il secondo passo è valutare ciò che si è visto. Salutando i miei collaboratori della Curia Romana in occasione dello scorso Natale, ho fatto una breve riflessione sul significato della crisi. La crisi apre possibilità nuove. È infatti una sfida aperta per affrontare la situazione attuale, per trasformare il tempo di prova in un tempo di scelta. Una crisi, infatti, costringe a scegliere per il bene o per il male. Da una crisi, come ho già ripetuto, non si esce uguali. O si esce migliori o si esce peggiori, ma uguali mai. Giudicare ciò che abbiamo visto e vissuto ci sprona a migliorare. Approfittiamo di questo tempo per muovere passi in avanti. La crisi che ha colpito tutti ci ricorda che nessuno si salva da solo. La crisi ci apre la strada verso un futuro che riconosca la vera uguaglianza di ogni essere umano, non un'uguaglianza astratta, ma concreta, che offra alle persone e ai popoli opportunità eque e reali di sviluppo. Agire. Chi non agisce spreca le opportunità offerte dalla crisi. Agire di fronte alle ingiustizie sociali e alle emarginazioni richiede un modello di sviluppo che ponga al centro ogni uomo e tutto l'uomo, come pilastro fondamentale da rispettare e proteggere, adottando una metodologia che includa l'etica della solidarietà e la carità politica. Ogni agire ha bisogno di una visione che sia di insieme e di speranza. Una visione come quella del profeta biblico Isaia, che vedeva le spade trasmutarsi in aratri, le lance in falci. Agire per lo sviluppo di tutti è porre in atto un'opera di conversione. E anzitutto decisioni che convertano la morte in vita, le armi in cibo. Ma abbiamo tutti bisogno di intraprendere anche una conversione ecologica. La visione d'insieme include infatti la prospettiva di un creato inteso come casa comune e richiede con urgenza di agire per proteggerlo. Cari amici, animato dalla speranza che viene da Dio, auspico che i vostri scambi di questi giorni contribuiscano a un modello di ripresa capace di generare soluzioni più inclusive e sostenibili. Un modello di sviluppo che si fondi sulla convivenza pacifica tra i popoli e sull'armonia con il creato. Buon lavoro e grazie.
Words of wisdom from Pope Francis: see, evaluate, act, take advantage of the present situation and move forward. To have a vision, a world vision, that's what we're talking about here as well. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Andrzej Duda is the President of the Republic of Poland. He will be speaking in Polish. And for those of you here in the room, feel free to use your headsets. There is translation available on channel 2. It should be automatic. President Duda, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, Madam President and Mr. President, Ministers, distinguished guests, dear friends, thank you very much. It's an absolutely unique opportunity to speak just after His Holiness, Pope Francis, and please use your electronic devices because I will speak in my mother tongue, in Polish. So, Szanowni Państwo Prezydenci,
distinguished presidents,
dostojni goście,
distinguished guests,
proszę pozwolić wyrazić mi
please let me
satysfakcję
express my
w
satisfaction
związku z tym, że
with
pomimo obiektywnych
connected with the
trudności,
fact that due to objective difficulties,
pomimo pandemii koronawirusa,
due to the coronavirus pandemic, or in spite of the coronavirus pandemic, we can meet here today in the beautiful Bratislava, one day after the conclusion of the NATO summit in Brussels, in order to discuss the important problems, but also about the future, especially also in the context of what we have just heard from His Holiness. All of us hope that the pandemic is coming to an end and that right now is the moment to talk about the challenges which are awaiting us, but also to draw conclusions. Draw conclusions from what has happened over the last year or so, things that have affected us. Why were we not able to prevent certain things? And what we have achieved thanks to a common effort, thanks to solidarity, thanks to cooperation, thanks to mutual better understanding. We should think about what we will be able to prevent in the future. We ourselves, all future generations. Although I do hope that they will never be confronted with such a challenge. Thank you very much for inviting me to this important conference, the topic of which is so strictly connected with the global problems, the problems of our region, especially in this particular moment, which I just mentioned. Our personal physical participation in this event would not have been possible if it was not for the security given to us by huge efforts of medical personnel and months of sacrifice connected with numerous restrictions, which I hope are already the past in their majority. Today, we are hopeful that the humanity has returned to the path of normality, that along with the vaccinations, we are able to successfully manage this crisis. Although, obviously, there is always the open question which remains, is it really the case? And I'm saying this not only in this particular speech I'm having now, because this is the question that we are asking ourselves in our unofficial conversations in the so-called bilateral formula. There's a question that also we, the presidents of the states, are asking. These were the topics of the conversations yesterday with the presidents, with the prime ministers, and these have also been the topics of the conversations we have had today. can we say that if the number of cases in my country, in Poland, has now dropped to the daily level, which we recorded exactly 1 year ago, that is between 200 and 400 cases every day, does that really mean that we can be happy and say that this is the effect of the vaccination? Or is it the consequence of the conditions, of the atmospheric conditions that we're seeing right now, the weather conditions? This is the season in which we are now. Last year, we didn't have the vaccination yet, and we had the same number of cases. Nevertheless, speaking optimistically, those two elements have come together. On the one hand, there is the ongoing vaccination process. In Poland, we have already vaccinated almost 25 million doses. 25 million doses have been distributed out of 38 million people. That is the population of Poland, which means that is a quite big share of the population which has received at least one shot of the vaccine. However, all of us hope that this vaccination will wipe out the coronavirus pandemic. But of course, unfortunately, the question remains whether it's going to be fully efficient. This is the question that we are still awaiting. And of course, the answer to this question is something that we have to wait for. Let me draw your attention to the fact that there are a few phenomena in the world which would have such a common character as the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. This small pathogen has attacked the whole world, affecting not only the public health, but inflicting death and suffering. But first and foremost, it shook the social sense of security. It shook the foundations of the global economy. No society and no economy have been able to resist that crisis. In this context, I can underline with full conviction and very resolutely that the only successful strategy for the post-pandemic recovery of the world, including our region, the region of Central Europe, is the one which foresees what I have already said at the outset of my speech. Global solidarity, global understanding, and global cooperation is the precondition. No country can feel safe unless other states are still grappling with the epidemic and its consequences. The recovery of economies is going to be much more difficult if the entire global economic organism is not fully recovered. That is why solidarity also in sharing access to vaccines is of fundamental importance in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, the leaders are currently facing huge challenges. First of all, they have to take care of the well-being of the societies which they represent. They have to go above particularistic interests and find in themselves the readiness to demonstrate solidarity. The objective, obviously, has to be avoiding of new divisions into the better and worse ones, into the richer and the poorer ones, into those vaccinated and those not vaccinated. This is our common fight, which requires revisiting fundamental values, Christian values, which have just been mentioned in a beautiful way by His Holiness, Pope Francis. But also, we need to think about humanistic roots, which are so important to all of us. The second fundamental challenge we are facing is acknowledging the paradigm of unavoidability to confront problems which existed also before the outbreak of the pandemic and which have not gone away. That's obvious. Let us just look at the neighborhood in the European Union. Russia is continuing its actions and it has announced further steps of the character of imperial pressure. It interferes into internal affairs of other states. It violates the foundations of international law, also vis-à-vis its own citizens. We are witnessing an increasingly unpredictable actions of the Belarusian regime. We have got the oppression, we have got the limitation of any kind of civic freedom. We have got people in prisons. Since 2018, the destabilized Libya is an arena of war operations and the target of hybrid actions. The countries in the south of Europe, for many years, have been struggling with the ongoing migration crisis, which constitutes a permanent threat. We can save humanity through the eradication, the global fighting of the virus, or defeating the virus. But let us also remember about other illnesses, such as authoritarianism, imperialism, a violation of international law and human rights. These are realistic problems which did exist before the pandemic, and which we have to adopt a constructive approach to, because, as I have said, they have not gone away. Your Excellencies, distinguished presidents, distinguished guests. Values are a fundamental thing. However, let us not forget that while talking about security, we also need to talk about the costs. Security is an investment, and in this very context, economy is of key importance. Fast recovery of the economies affected by the crisis is very important. But what is even more important is the model of such recovery. The post-pandemic economic order has to adopt as its departure, on the one hand, coming back to the path of dynamic growth, on the other hand, however, resilience. However, first and foremost, I would like to express my conviction that these two factors have to be correlated with one another. For I have no doubt whatsoever that the growth, in other words, the improvement of economic situation, the improvement of the welfare of the societies, by the same token, is going to build resilience. In order to obtain this resilience, in order to equip our economies with tools which are going to amortize the future possible effects of the future economic shocks, we have to revise our so-far way of thinking about the network of global financial interdependencies, trade and investment interdependencies alike. The discussion concerning these problems is in the pipeline, and it's very well. The conclusions from our so-far experiences, and let me just remind you that this has been the second global crisis that has affected us in the last 10 years or so, have been accounted for in the European Recovery Instrument, Next Generation EU, as well as in the national recovery plans developed by member states. This is important, that in the public debate there is a thinking about the need to give a new impulse to stimulate the production within the European Union, the effect of which will also be the shortening of supply chains, which, on the other hand, will generate more security. I wrote about it in a letter which I addressed to European leaders more than 1 year ago, and I'm happy that a lot of pleas from that letter today constitute the content of the European Union's plan developed to recover after the pandemic. I'm also happy that we express care for future generations. This is expressed, among others, by sustainable approach to climate policy, taking into account elements of social and development policy. In other words, something that we have called just transition. I have no doubts whatsoever that the recovery model adopted by Poland, based on a broad-scale program of infrastructure public investments, investments in the private sector, profound energy and digital transformation, and better effectiveness and accessibility of the public sector, of the public health services, will generate a new economic architecture, an architecture which will allow us to develop further in an unlimited way. At the same time, my homeland will be resilient to the future possible global shocks. I would like to stress very powerfully that this is the priority leading my second term in office as president, which was called Duda's plan in the last year's presidential campaign. And today, It makes part of the Polish governmental program, which is described as a new order, or finally, as a Polish order. A big enthusiasm vis-à-vis this program is reflected, among others, by objective analysis. Last week, the World Bank has revised the GDP of Poland. The forecast is now 3.8% this year and 4.5% in 2022. A similar opinion has been expressed also by the European Commission, which in mid-May increased the assessed dynamics of growth of Poland up to 4% of GDP in 2021 and up to 5.4% in 2022. This model will also make part of a broader recovery plan, thanks to which our region is going to be one of the most robustly developing ones. The expected growth of GDP in Central Europe is supposed to amount to 4.6% in the nearest future. All of us hope that these forecasts will come true. Ladies and gentlemen, revisiting the essential question of this debate, namely, if there is any unique, extraordinary way for the countries of our region to recover post-pandemic, I can say with full conviction and full responsibility, yes, I do believe there is such a path. Not just for one state of the region, for the states of the region, as a certain community, as an element of a big community that is of the European Union. This plan I'm referring to, this idea, this path, I believe, is the 3 Cs initiative, which is the format of regional cooperation which is complementary to the European Union integration and which speaks about tightening strategic cooperation across the Atlantic. We are lucky that this area we are talking about, Central Europe, is inhabited by nations who are extraordinarily ambitious, hardworking, and creative by nature. Nations which have gone through many experiences, nations which are not afraid of challenges. We want to harness this positive energy which is permeating the entire 3 Cs region. The initiative is developing. We are equipping it with ever newer instruments and mechanisms which define its subsequent functionalities and give it the valor of full maturity. Currently, the most important tool which supports its aims is the 3 Cs Investment Fund, thanks to which we have started to co-finance projects on a regional scale. However, there are also other tools. CEE Plus Index, 3 Cs Region Forum, combined with the Economic Congress, as well as the 3 Cs Business Forum, organized every year in the margins of the subsequent summits. We can see a big interest in cooperation with the 3 Cs initiative on part of the external partners, Japan, Greece, Great Britain, not to mention that our strategic partners, for many years now, right from the inception, we can say, have been European institutions, the United States of America, and Germany. Germany, the best developed country from the infrastructure point of view, not only in the European Union, but across the whole Europe. One of the absolutely best developed countries, if not the best developed country in the world. I profoundly believe in the sense of this cooperation. I consider the 3 Cs initiative to be the most representative formula of deeper integration of the countries of our region within the European Union and as the best way to strengthen the transatlantic bond. In this context, it's worth stressing that all the 3 strategic goals of the initiative, the development of infrastructure, energy, and digital infrastructure, are inextricably connected with security. Only strong economically and well-integrated region is able to tackle the situation during future crises. Let us hope we are not confronted with any future crisis. Nevertheless, we have to be prepared always, and I do believe that we are going to be prepared. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so very much for encapsulating your views on the hopes and challenges that we face as we go forward, not just in health and security, but across the spectrum. It's my pleasure now to invite Croatian President Zoran Milanovic to address the forum. Sir, the forum's yours.
Madam President, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, due to the time constraints, the first victim that will fall to this is this minutely and carefully scripted speech by my close friend and associate, a NATO professor, because it's overlong. It touches all the important issues, but I can't touch upon all of them. And since the topic of our gathering is, somebody would say outlandish, let's rebuild the better world, I think it's a far-fetched for me as a Croatian president. So I will focus on some things that are value-based and that I've noticed as worrying, to say the least. And it pertains to Corona crisis, which is still going on. So first, my compliments to our hosts of this beautiful, bristling, bustling, developing city of Bratislava, whom I tracked for 25, 30 years now. I started as a high school boy, and this was really different. This was like a spent force, gray, socialist, not in the best sense of the word, not the one the Pope would subscribe to. It was spent. And then it started changing and changing and changing, and year after year after year, on the human culture of aspiration, accumulation, hello everyone, of sense and desire for accomplishment, and yes, the thirst for money and success, which gives people security and sense of accomplishment. 20 years fast forward, and this is the city, and this region is among the 6 or 7 most developed metropolitan zones in the EU. This is something. This is a big deal. So I commend you, and I actually envy you for that. This is not a platitude, I really mean that, it's obvious. Let's go back 20 years. So the first time I saw the world, the America, really going to the standstill was almost 20 years ago on the September 11th, the Tuesday, 2001. I happened to find myself wandering around Pentagon that morning when the plane struck. I was not exactly an eyewitness, but I was a back witness because I sensed something happened. And it really struck me deeply, you know. I was scared, shocked. And then the first signs emerged. The skies closed. No planes landing or ascending on the blue sky above Washington, D.C. Streets empty. I went to my hotel after trying to reach Europe unsuccessfully for an hour because the phone lines were cut. And then afternoon, I took a jogging. I put on my sneakers, my running shoes, at the outskirts of Georgetown, Four Seasons Hotel. Some of you know that. Only to see that the city was empty. I was a good runner back then. I was 20 years younger and 20 pounds lighter. Nobody around. Nobody around. Oh my God. It was 20 years ago. The first, and until recently, the only time that I saw something really weird, you know, something chilling happening. Different world. Now, let's go back 3 years from this point. If somebody told you that the world would look like it did, that the streets would be empty, that we would be wearing masks for so long, you wouldn't believe that. It reminded me of that epochal scene of the movie which is so dear to my heart. Some of you might have seen it. It's a Blade Runner by Ridley Scott. And there is a final scene where Rutger Hauer, the famous and popular Dutch actor at the time, holds the fate of Harrison Ford in his hands. He's a replicant, he's an artificial human being, and he speaks of his experience in the outer world, in outer atmospheres, in the galaxies, and goes like, I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire, a sea beams glittering at a Tannhäuser Gate. And this is the scene that recurs in my mind time and again, has been recurring in this period of time, because I really wouldn't believe, I really wouldn't have possibly believed that things that we witnessed over last year are possible. Human rights, values we're talking about, personal liberty, all those things that we were prone to take for granted were tested. And we should take a good stock of this crisis. Actually, we should not allow this good crisis to go to waste, to see where we really excelled, in what things we were brilliant, where we erred, where we failed, and where we failed miserably, because all these categories have its population and are settled by some examples. I personally think that we approach to this curbing of human rights quite lightly, quite naively, that we allowed in many aspects, in many forms, way too many governments. I'm speaking as a we, I'm head of state though, I'm not an executive. I can speak from the perspective of my country, but I peeked into the others. I trespassed a bit and I made an analysis how different European liberal or less liberal democracies for that matter behaved. This was emergency. And the declaration of emergency was very seldom followed by the appropriate parliamentary acts. The parliament is a sovereign in the UK. In our countries, the people, the nation, folk, whatever you take it, are sovereign. They were not given a word. This was all too administrative. Way too many restrictions on our freedom imposed by the government, by the ruling elites. This is not a populist gathering, so this is composition of the people of knowledge, kind of wonkish even. So I utter this phrase with caution, but with conviction at the same time. This is something that must never forget. We don't know much about this virus. We don't know yet whether it emerged or sneaked out from the Chinese laboratory in Wuhan, because there are way too many coincidences pertaining to that environment. We don't know whether it's zoonotic, maybe. Probably it was not dispersed by Chinese intent. One could hardly take that as a possibility. We do know that we mostly took similar measures, and those measures in our societies being ratified by parliaments, by representatives of the people or not, more or less, have yielded different outcomes. My country is among top 15 countries in terms of deaths per million people. Losers, huh? But yours too, Slovakia and Poland and Slovenia. We took similar stances, similar restrictions, similar fears, translated into similar policies, and so on. The outcome, 2,000 roughly dead people per million. And that's the yardstick. We're talking lost human souls. It's a yardstick. In Japan, it's 50. Even though I'm perplexed, baffled that such a sophisticated post-industrial country as Japan, huge as Russia in terms of human population, never managed to come close to developing its own vaccine, but it didn't. Russians did, Americans did. It works, it's functional, it's effective. Sweden, as a prolific or permanent outlier, the country always so different and so self-assured and sometimes arrogant, took totally different stance for what they were chided and lambasted by all medical journals. Lancet was the last in February, but Swedish results are better. They had barely, compared to our 2,000, barely 1,300 deaths per million. With that naive, outlandish approach, no masks, or just in the retirement homes, no gatherings bigger than 300 people, and so it on, back and forth. Of course, they fared worse than Danes and Norwegians and Finns, who scored. It's a very harsh term, who had it better. Now, what is the conclusion? I'm not that boastful or self-assured or self-confident to offer you one. I don't know. I know that in future time, we will have to be aware that some things matter and that some things should not be compromised. And it brings back that famous dictum of Ben Franklin, which was uttered 250 years ago, albeit in different environment. It pertains to one petty tax issue in Boston, but it still rings loud today and it's worth reckoning. It says, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. This sounds like a platitude, but there is a big philosophical underlying content for me to say this and to share that with you. We differ amongst ourselves. We had the NATO summit yesterday. Poland, republics of the Baltic, which I actually hate I prefer referring to them by their names, and that's Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. Slovakia, for that matter, were very concerned for good reason with Russia and its expansionist, muscling, bullying tactics, politics, strategies, whatsoever, and it's natural. Croatia is in a different position. We sympathize with Russians and the other way around, but that's because we do not know each other. And we are not, blessed with their vicinity or adjacent vicinity to our borders. We had different calamities of our own, different sufferings. We are the only country that emerged from the war, being a member of the EU now, that was cast into war, whose head of state, Franjo Tudjman, never my choice, was almost assassinated in a terrorist attempt on his life in 1991. It never happened. It never came to pass any place other in Europe, not remotely. So our mentality, our experience, and experience casts character, and expectations is different. Your fears are founded, they're rational fears. Fears are almost very often irrational, but these fears, this worrying, this uneasiness is certified. It's there, it's clear, it's present, it's danger. Croatia is facing problems of its own. I will speak a word or two about my native country, which elected me for the president a year and a half ago, after I failed miserably as a prime minister, but somehow they still managed to elect me. That's what I say. We are sharing border with Bosnia-Herzegovina, land border. In 2015, the big wave of immigrants, migrating people from Syria and God knows where else from. I was prime minister at the time, and I implemented, against expectations of some in my country, against opposition of many, the open door policy, or actually the open trajectory policy. We allowed people to pass through. It's not that everybody thought it that way. And the people and the leaders and the prime minister at the time differed largely. So it was easy for me to decide that way, because I knew that eventually the final destination point will be Germany. And somehow, that never ever mentioned before, the human right to reside in Munich was established in practice. So those people were going north, and the final destination was Germany. Not even Austria was good enough for them. But it happened once. And I was happy and able to live with that. And I think that Angela Merkel at the time gave moral and ethical, whichever you prefer better, guidance to the world. But it is the one chance, one opportunity. It's a one-off. It cannot happen twice. After that, the borders are the borders. As the outgoing David Cameron told me back then, that when I asked him about suggestion, advice, it turned out that he's not the best advisor in strategic decisions. And he told me, well, buddy, borders are borders. And I told him, well, the island is an island, and you're an island, so we're not an island. Even though I could have blocked the country like this, weekend of business with the barbed wire, because the configuration of geography is such. Big rivers and just one small traction of land that is passable. These days we have to protect that border if we are to be admitted to Schengen zone. We're not yet, even though technically we qualified years ago. Of course, Bulgaria and Romania have been in the waiting room for a decade now. So my take on the issue is, let's admit Bulgaria and Romania immediately into Schengen zone. It makes life easier for Slovakia. Things have changed fundamentally over the last 20 years. And Croatia, sooner or later, but in practice even today, is guarding that border. Well, guarding it from the human beings who are, sorry to say that, trespassing. Trespassing from Bosnia, they're squatting there, they're congregating there, waiting for the opportunity to pass that narrow stretch of land that separates Bosnia from Slovenia, which is in Schengen. And it happens on a daily basis. So We would prefer not being criticized for something we cannot perfectly control and be admitted as a part of the solution. For my country, it's not a matter of life or death, but it would be certainly better to have Croatia as a Schengen, technically long-time qualifiers, politically, I'm at liberty to think so, that we deserve to be there. It's in your interest, guys. This brings me to conclusion. So this is a crisis we must take a stock of. It was unpredictable, unbelievable. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. I couldn't believe that. That we would be wearing the masks, that we would be that we would be inventing vaccine in a matter of months and counter some traditional procedures. There were some, grievances and criticism about Sputnik vaccine, which has not been approved by the European Food and Drugs Administration, whatever the name of that agency is. But I said that in January, if I were to protect my people, my nation, because I'm the president of the nation, my folk. It sounds chilling, but that's something I'm responsible for. I wouldn't be constrained from making deals with Chechen mobsters if they could provide me for the functioning vaccine that would protect my population. And that's what I think should be at the core of thinking, acting, and belief of all national leaders. After all, that's what I am. I cannot wish or hope for more. This is my life, this is my quest, this is my destiny. This is manifest destiny of all our peoples. It's Europe, it's common values, not necessarily the same, because I will never ever come to terms with Viktor Orban, but we agree to talk and joke with each other. And it was hilarious yesterday. Actually, the best thing was meeting Viktor Orban again. I enjoy his company, I really mean that. You should laugh. No, I really mean that. We really had a good time. But we disagree on some issues. But we're good neighbors. We're not threatening each other. After histories and centuries of misunderstanding, of trying to impose one upon each other, us less so upon them, then them more so upon us, like on Slovaks, those are bygones. They don't matter anymore. I would be so happy as a person and a human being to be able to say so in 2 or 3 years for the other ethnic groups and nations of the Western Balkans. We should not forget them, because if they are left to their own devices, your proverbial enemies will come over and take them as their clients. And you very well understand what I'm talking about. So it goes for Serbia, which must take more seriously the concepts of functional democracy, but also for Bosnia and Herzegovina. The current country torn apart, composed of 3 constituent ethnic groups. This is a very serious issue being dealt by the second and even third tier diplomats from Berlin, London, until recently, and other European capitals. And the other simply don't care about that. Very serious issue. So much about the world. I stood in the neighborhood. I refrained from trespassing further because simply I don't know much about China, about South America, about Africa. Thank you for this opportunity to hear the Pope's take on all these issues, because Pope is, this Pope in particular, is a moral authority for me. I'm a lapsed Catholic, to say the least. Not even that. I'm not a religious person, but this person instilled some belief in me over the last year or so, because the things he's trying to promote are sea change. Not necessarily everybody thinks so, but that's what I think. Once again, thank you so much for inviting me. I wish you to thrive, prosper, accumulate money, because that's what makes people feel good and feel accomplished and actually feel safe and secure. There is another harbor of safety. That's rule of law. That's where I feel better. Thank you so much.
President Milanovic, thank you very much for that. And I want to thank all three presidents that we've heard from here today for your candor, for your reflections, and for your insights. A warm round of applause for all three presidents.
I'd also like to thank our partners who've made this possible. We've talked about our institutional partners, but I'd also like to thank our general partners, ESET, KNDS, MSD, and Saab, our forum partners, Ericsson, Google, MasterCard, Microsoft, and Tachyon.
And we want to thank those who have helped us on the health side. We have health partners with whom this would not have been possible, helping to keep us safe. Multiplex DH, Vacuum Labs, Biomedical Research Center of the Slovak Academy of Sciences, thank you.
In the meantime, before I start thanking our media partners, I'd like to thank our presidents. I know you have agendas to get to. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. If you can make your way towards the side, the teams will guide you out. In the meantime, can I say thank you to our global media partners, the Associated Press, Euronews, and AFP. Our next session, Terry, starts in about 5 minutes. And as the presidents and their entourage leave, I'd like you all to stay seated if you're attending our session on international trade.
I know that many of you, of course, are very eager to have a coffee break. There is a coffee break coming up right after the global trade session. Maythree and I will be back later on this afternoon to wrap up what all has happened here. Thank you very much for being with us for the opening of GLOBSEC 21 Bratislava Forum.
Yep, international trade is up next. We're going to be talking about all the impacts on the supply chain issues that have been hinted at. So we'll leave you to it. Do stay in your seats and we'll begin imminently.